talk to me about the, the decision that South Africa took some 7 years ago to join BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and putting the S at the end, making it BRICS. Has that decision been vindicated in terms of seeing returns on trade, seeing returns on investment, but also the punching above our weight in the geopolitics of the world?
You know, it's a question that many people ask, and we look at maybe the tangible benefits, the economic benefits that come out of being part of this collective, part of this small multilateral grouping of countries. And what we see with this is really that, and it was actually 9 years ago, and we didn't really choose to be part of the BRICS. We were invited to join alongside with the likes of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and especially Brazil. Brazil drove that agenda. We share many of the same values as Brazil. So beyond those tangible returns that we've seen, and we have seen a doubling of trade for South Africa with the other BRICS countries. That's going from $200 billion up to nearly $500 billion. That might be a doubling of trade, but if we look at it in the bigger scheme of things, I don't think it's enough. It's not enough just yet to talk about this doubling of trade because, yes, it is a doubling, but it's not a substantial amount on that global scale. I would look more at the rate of investment, how much investment is coming into the country, into South Africa, and how we are leveraging this for the right type of investment and targeted investment, and as well as how does BRICS contribute to the economic competitiveness of South Africa, as well as South Africa's standing on the global stage in those multilateral fora.
So, in fact, interesting you should raise the issue of trade, because President Cyril Ramaphosa says actually that's what he'll be driving, that's the agenda he'll be driving when he meets his counterparts from these other 4 countries, and tomorrow he hosts the Chinese President Xi Jinping. At this particular point, given following the downturn of 2008 and everything that has happened subsequently as things stand and the Chinese economy as it stands right now, can we get more trade and investment out of China at this particular point, given the fact that they also face that situation with the United States where there's a looming trade war?
Yeah, the trade wars are obviously the big issue at the moment, and no doubt that's going to be on the agenda of at the BRICS summit this coming week. But I think we must look not just what we can get from the likes of China and perhaps India, Russia and Brazil. Let's not forget Brazil's still in a state of crisis, embroiled in the largest corruption scandal in world history and trying to pull its way out of it in an election year in that country. But let's look at how we can be competitive vis-a-vis our BRICS partners. Some of the reasons why we have failed to reap the true benefits of trade and investment, I would say beyond just maybe lifting it up to a 500 billion rand mark to maybe a trillion rand mark, is perhaps that we are not competitive enough. So maybe we need to look within and look at how we can build our sectors and our industries to be competitive, to improve the trade flows, and especially the exports from South Africa to those countries. Let's not forget the types of exports that we are trading or that we are sending across to those markets are mostly of primary product nature. So we're looking at something that we need to add value to, something that we can look at in terms of manufacturing or perhaps in high-tech industries. And that's what we really got to focus on. Yes, we can build this in, and the role of President Ramaphosa and the rest of the negotiators is to build agreements that will enable trade and investment. Let's not forget a very, very important point around these tangibles of trade and investment. Trade and investment is between companies, not countries. And what the country's role is at this stage is to create these agreements, these MOUs, and an enabling environment to allow us to trade with our partners in the BRICS.
Talk to me about BRICS in the broader geopolitics of the world, the politics of things, Lyal. South Africa is set to serve another term in the UN Security Council. This is the rotational seat that Africa gets from, that Africa gets and is rotated between the African countries. 2 of those countries in the BRICS group are permanent members, China and Russia. How does South Africa play this one in terms of things that may come before the Security Council, but also given some of the tensions that come up between the United States, for example, and countries like Russia, like China?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question in terms of geopolitics and where we are in the world right now in this shifting global order. I think South Africa's got a unique opportunity this year, and especially now just being appointed onto the Security Council as a non-permanent, into a non-permanent seat. We share some or many of the same values and the same positions as Brazil, in those types of fora as well, so we'll always have an ally. China and Russia are different animals. They've got a much more unilateral approach to engagement on the global stage, as does India. So it's going to be interesting as to if and where and how we use BRICS to try and drive this multilateral agenda. We've never done it successfully before. I wonder if we can do that now.
Let's not forget, Lyal, that the United States recently flagged South Africa as one of the top 10 countries that seem to always vote against the United States, and actually said, well, they're going to be making decisions on investment and aid based on that as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you might have read it in a tweet in much of the same way that much of the foreign policy decisions are made in the United States at this stage. I wouldn't be too worried about that. Yes, there's a lot of threats that come out of the rhetoric that we've seen coming out of the United States at the moment. But we go back to the original point. If we are competitive, they can't ignore us as an investment destination. And especially the way, I might add, President Ramaphosa has included the rest of Africa in this BRICS summit. They've invited 13 other countries, 9 of which are African nations, to participate in this. In other words, South Africa now has assumed the role to represent Africa and to really bring Africa into this fold of BRICS countries and an investment environment.
I've got to squeeze this one in. The institutions that BRICS promised, the new development bank, and also there was going to be a ratings agency that they were going to start. In fact, I think at some point they were talking about the possibility of a whole new currency. The Washington Bretton Woods consensus was going to be challenged. Has BRICS achieved that, or are they on track to eventually achieving that?
Well, in terms of the new development bank, they're making substantial loans. South Africa is becoming a large recipient of this. And I think what is very, very interesting is how they're trying to team this new development bank up with other development banks in Asia and perhaps in future in Latin America. In terms of the credit rating agencies, I think this is a very important and progressive move to look for credit rating agencies that measure countries differently, that look beyond linear economics and straight line trajectories, and that give a much more comprehensive and a realistic view of these countries. As for the currency, I think that's a long way away. If we fail to implement integration in our own regions, then I think it's going to be a long way before we can have some type of monetary union between countries of such different sizes and dimensions.